All right, everyone, welcome back into another NFL props video. Going to be touching on my top prop bets here for this two-game slate on Christmas. Let's go ahead and get into it. So guys, this two-game slate is going to be a slate in which the game script for both games could really dictate the success of our bet slips. Okay, so for example, we've got the Baltimore Ravens versus the Houston Texans. The Ravens are 5.5-point favorites, which we know is going to be more of a Derrick Henry game. And so for me, I like his rush attempts prop bet over. We'll touch on that in just a second here, but we're going to touch on the Pittsburgh Steelers versus Kansas City Chiefs game first. Okay, so the Chiefs are going to be 3-point favorites in this game, and with that, the Steelers have been giving Najee Harris less snaps over the last 2 weeks because they've been playing from behind. And so that's another example of if the Steelers are indeed playing from behind by at least 3 points, like Vegas is telling us, that's going to change some of the bets that we would potentially be on, and that's going to really influence the bet slips that we are on. So we're going to start with that early game with the Chiefs versus the Steelers. And the first bet that I like is actually looking at Patrick Mahomes to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Now, this is predicated on everyone being fully healthy again like they were last week. And I just mentioned that because this is their third game in 11 days. Injuries can pop up in that shortened time span. Don't expect it, but that could end up happening. Now, he actually gets a seemingly decent matchup here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you guys look at it, the Steelers DST has been a team that over the first 10 weeks or so, pretty darn solid. If we look at really over the last 4 weeks, not nearly as good. So over the last 4 weeks, the Steelers DST has given up 10 passing touchdowns for an average of 2.5 passing touchdowns. We see Patrick Mahomes lately, he hasn't really gone over that passing touchdown all too much. Only one last week, but if we look at kind of the game film from last week, we would notice a play like this from Justin Watson on the second drive, or on their second scoring drive, just flat out drops and kind of easier touchdown grab. And it's not to say that this play won't happen again, but it is nice to see that there was another touchdown out there for him. Now, when we look at the odds for this bet, they are giving it about a 50-50 likelihood, which we'll see. I think that line could end up going a little bit higher as the game gets closer in favor of the over. So not only did Justin Watson drop a touchdown pass, but we did have Patrick Mahomes having his longest rushing touchdown of his career last week as well, coming in off of that bum ankle as well, right? That kind of makes you think. But a little part of this bet is actually going to be calling out the running back situation for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so the RB situation is that Isaiah Pacheco obviously still seemingly recovering from that injury that he had at the beginning of the season. We have seen him play the last 4 weeks, but his snaps have been limited the last 2 weeks. And I do think that that has been intentional by the Kansas City Chiefs, just given the schedule that they have. Again, 3 games in 11 days. And so we saw them do this last year with Travis Kelce as well, where they really limited his snaps throughout the regular season and really his production as well, included in that, to have him ready for the playoffs. I think they're doing that with Pacheco. Now, that being said, Kareem Hunt actually has looked good the last 2 weeks, especially last week. It seemed like the perfect timing for Pacheco to come back, where it seemed like Kareem Hunt, they got all the usage out of him that they could, the Chiefs that being said, and Pacheco was coming back at a great time because Hunt was looking washed. And maybe he's just someone that needs a limited workload because he did look pretty decent last week. And so it's not like I want to be in either of the two running backs, but that calls out as to why I'm thinking Patrick Mahomes over his past TDs could be the bet that we would want to look at. And the Steelers DST, although they've been a little bit worse recently over the last 4 weeks in regards to their passing game defense, their rush defense has been pretty good. So I do think the Chiefs will be attacking via the passing game. So then sticking with that, if we are going to be betting on that passing game to be there for the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't mind the idea of getting on Travis Kelce for over his 4.5 receptions. Now, if you're someone that bets primarily on PrizePicks per se, they do have a goblin out there at 3.5 or 4.5 receptions. Again, I don't mind that idea. You could potentially go with a demon for over 5.5 receptions there as well. But basically what that's telling us is that the line really should be at 5. It's likely that he's going to get 5 for his receptions in this game. And if you look at it, guys, over the last 4 weeks, again, just looking at that for the Steelers DST, because they clearly have not been as good lately. Now, that could be a little bit due to the caliber of talent that they've been playing, but still, it holds true because they are playing a good team here in the Kansas City Chiefs. So they've given up the 3rd most receptions to opposing tight ends over the last 4 weeks, giving up an average of 6.75 receptions. And so with that, I do think that production will just directly go to Travis Kelce. The snaps have all been the same. The targets have been the same there as well, which is why I like that. So then sticking with the Chiefs passing game, I do like the idea of betting on Xavier Worthy to get over 3.5 receptions or 4.5 receptions if you guys are looking for a little bit of an increased payout there. And now I was a little bit worried that his production could fall off a little bit in this game with Marquise Brown being activated from the IR, and that could end up being true throughout the end of the season and maybe into the playoffs there as well. But again, for this game where it's a short week, especially for a guy like Marquise Brown coming in off an injury, I expect his snaps to about be the same as they were last week. And so Worthy, who's been playing 80% of the snaps over the last 3 weeks now, I expect him to continue to get a lot of work. 11 targets, 6 targets. Like, the targets have been there for him. Now the production is finally starting to meet up. And if you look at it, guys, it seems like it's starting to come together for him. Like, he looked good last week. Now, I always worry a little bit about rookies coming in off of a shorter week. That does, worry me a little bit game plan wise, but he should be good to go in this game. Again, he does draw a decent matchup here as well. The Steelers DST, although slightly better over the last 4 weeks compared to the tight end position, really not all that good as well. So they're bottom 5 pass defense in terms of receptions and yards given up to opposing receivers over the last 4 weeks. And thus, I do like the idea of getting to Worthy for over 3.5 receptions, or again, if you guys want the increased payout rather than the reduced payout, over 4.5 receptions. I'm kind of good with both of those. We're betting on that workload to still be there for him again, and I do think it will be. Now, guys, real quickly, I do want to talk about the other Chiefs pass catchers and kind of my thoughts on them. I thought Hollywood Brown looked good last week. I don't see the point of betting on him, though. He was limited in his snaps, only played in about 33% of the passing down snaps, and only played about 27% of the snaps total. I think that's very intentional. I think they are going to limit his snaps really up until the playoffs, just slowly acclimate him back into football shape so that he's good to go for the playoffs. Encouraged that he looked good. That does help out Patrick Mahomes. I think having that weapon there, crazy. This offense is actually going to be really good, I think, in the playoffs with Hopkins most likely playing more snaps, and then Hollywood Brown obviously playing more snaps, and with Worthy now starting to look good. That's definitely interesting. But let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins here. So he has been someone that throughout this whole season, his snaps have been limited. At the start of the year when he was with the Titans, I just assumed that was because he was coming in off of an injury, and he was always on the injury report. And then once he was finally off, I'm like, okay, he's been playing about 50% of the snaps. He should be likely to get up to 65%. That really never happened for him, and that has also continued here for Kansas City. So he's really only playing on the money downs, if you will, like red zone and also third down opportunities, And so with that, he is on the field for the snaps that you would want him to be on, like getting 67% of the passing down plays. But it does really seem like they are very intentional about limiting his snaps. Now, the nice thing about Hopkins is that Hollywood Brown being back did not change his snaps really at all. Hollywood Brown being back actually hurt Juju Smith-Schuster snaps, and also Noah Gray as well. And so I really don't mind the idea of being on DeAndre Hopkins to get over like 3.5 receptions. He has been able to do that basically in every game thus far this season, in games in which he's played and finished, especially with the Chiefs now. So I'm kind of fine with that. We see over his last 5 games, clearly has gotten that over. It can be a sweat because he's not playing that many snaps. That is the worry there, but I think it should be a solid one there for us. And then I do think it's interesting to call out Noah Gray in regards to his fantasy score line here. So this is one of the better bets that we have on the PrizePicks board right now, which is him to get under 4.5 for a fantasy score, which prior to Hollywood Brown being back last week and taking snaps away from Gray, I would have said I probably would like the over bet here because he had kind of been the number 2 pass catcher for this offense during that stretch in which Rice was out and a little bit of Pacheco being out as well. Well, now I'm a little bit hesitant. I'm probably not going to bet on this either way, although I am more on the under part of this bet. I think that does make more sense now, especially in a game where I do think the Chiefs could get that lead, maybe 2 passing touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes early in that game, and then the fourth quarter, they're just trying to kill the clock because that Pittsburgh Steelers offense isn't able to get going. And so a big reason why that offense might not be able to get going would be maybe George Pickens still sitting out in this game here as well. So he hasn't been cleared to play yet. He did have an estimated full practice on Monday, which who really cares about that? We need that final kind of outcome if he's going to play or not, because that really dictates kind of the game script, some of those bets that I called out already, but also some of the bets that we would want to be on here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if Pickens plays, that does help with the offense. I think that would increase the likelihood for Najee Harris to get some snaps there as well, because the game would be close enough for long enough then. But if we get news that George Pickens is going to end up seeing this game, I actually like the idea of being on Calvin Austin a decent amount here. He was someone that I liked at the start of the season. I was a little bit sad to see the workload that he had, but since George Pickens has been out, guys, he's seen 4 targets, 5 targets, and 5 targets. The last 2 weeks playing in 80% of the snaps. So this is a bet where, yes, if George Pickens does end up sitting, that does hurt out the offense, which maybe they're just not able to get things going offensively. But Russell Wilson's a good enough quarterback to be able to get the football to Calvin Austin like he has been able to do the last few weeks. And again, I do expect that to continue. And so for me, the over 2.5 receptions would be a pretty good bet. Now, we are getting prop bets for George Pickens, so this might be a bet where you see George Pickens is active. I think that's what that means with us getting prop bets for him, is that Vegas is leaning more towards George Pickens playing. And honestly, the fact that we're getting Calvin Austin prop bets also, I think, points to George Pickens being active. And so that's a concern here. Obviously, we would gain a much bigger edge if George Pickens does end up sitting with a prop bet like this. So guys, from there, are there any other Pittsburgh prop bets that I like? Really, not really. And I don't know why I phrased it that way, but my bad. What old song was that? Really, not really. Whatever. Anyways, Pat Freiermuth for his under fantasy scores, like a decent bet popping up on the board right now, about a 53% likelihood for that to hit. But he is someone that, you know, if, again, George Pickens does end up sitting, he actually benefits a decent amount. He had a 78% route share last week with George Pickens off the field. A decent amount of targets in that game as well. I could see betting on his over like 2.5 receptions, but I don't really think it's worthwhile at that point. It's okay. Don't feel the need to get there. But I do want to talk about the running back situation for the Steelers as well. And so the Steelers running backs do get a very difficult matchup here against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why I want to be targeting some of the pass catchers here. And if you look at it, guys, yes, it probably will be Jaylen Warren if this game is a game in which the Steelers are indeed playing from behind like they did do the last 2 weeks against Philly and against Baltimore. No shock there. I think we would all say that the Chiefs are, if not better, than those two teams, or about the same at least. And so with that, I do expect Jaylen Warren to get a decent amount of work in the backfield here, especially in the receiving game. Now, do I exactly want to bet on that? No, I don't. Cordero Patterson could get a little bit of work out of the backfield there as well. Now, Harris has been impressive thus far this year, guys. But again, in a game where they're playing from behind, he's just not going to get that much work. He is basically Derrick Henry light, the off-brand version of Derrick Henry, if you will, where if the game script is not favorable for the run game, they're playing from behind, he's not going to get that much work. So that actually leads us into the Baltimore Ravens. Let's go ahead and jump into that game. So one of my favorite prop bets would actually be Derrick Henry to get over his 18.5 rush attempts. So the game lines for this game are in favor of the Baltimore Ravens winning by 5.5 points. And if that does end up being true, if they are playing with the lead here, I do like the idea of Derrick Henry getting his over 18.5 rush attempts. Now, I do think it's worth calling out. This bet, the under is favored, 51% likelihood. This is the annoyance of betting on the NFL right now on PrizePicks or Underdog, is that all the good bets that we have are becoming goblin bets basically instantly. They are forcing us into placing these standard bets like this, where the under is slightly favored there, which I don't like doing that. I don't exactly like recommending that to you guys. And that's why I keep saying these are better traditional sportsbook bets. These lines that are standard lines where the under is favored here. And I'm telling you guys to bet the over. So if you plan something like Flip or Sleeper, a little bit better option there where the payout is going to be adjusted correctly there. Whereas PrizePicks and Underdog, they're not giving us a boosted payout for this bet where the under is favored. Now, guys, while we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens, I think it's important to call out that Justice Hill probably going to sit in this game. It seems like that. And so if he does end up sitting, we could see potentially Keaton Mitchell just go straight into that Justice Hill role. We remember Keaton Mitchell from last year, really good talent, has a lot of bursts there, really fun talent, honestly. I kind of hope that he's going to be good to go and healthy. He's just a fun jitterbug type player. He would be an upgrade from Hill, I would think. Eventually, maybe not right away. But with Justice Hill sitting last week, we actually saw Derrick Henry get 78% of the work from that point on, okay? Which is not surprising. They were playing with the lead in that game, and we see in games in which they are playing with the lead, he does consistently get this over rush attempts prop bet or prop line, except for that game against the Giants in which they just really crushed them. It's the Giants. You don't need them to get too much work, kind of like the Packers on Monday Night Football against the Saints. Yeah, you're not going to give your star running back too much work in a game that you know you're going to win. And so this is a game that should stay close against Houston. Houston's going to be without Tank Dell. Maybe that hurts their offense enough to the point where it's a blowout really fast. But no, I think this is a game in which the Ravens are going to be playing with the lead, and they will have a touchdown lead in this game or so. And if that occurs, I think we're going to see him be able to get over this rush attempt line here of 18.5 rush attempts. Now, guys, are there any other like Ravens prop bets that I really like? No, I don't see any of them out there. Like, sure, if I had to force a bet in there, Mark Andrews maybe over his fantasy score would be one that we could be looking at. We see that one has about a 52.6% likely to hit. He is someone that has consistently seen more snaps than Isaiah Likely lately. And the Ravens are running out a lot of 12 personnel, but it does seem to be that Mark Andrews was just a little bit banged up at the start of the year, whereas now he has looked good over the past really month and a half now. And so I could see doing that. But to me, it just kind of would feel like we're forcing it there. So we are seeing that his line here for his reception is set at 3.5 as a Goblin, or you could bet on the Demon at 4.5. So if you guys are confused by that, Goblin is just an extremely likely bet. Demon is not as likely bet. You're going to get rewarded more for betting on a Demon if it hits, whereas a Goblin, the payouts can be significantly reduced. The point that I'm bringing up here, though, is he's likely to get 4 receptions, and his receiving line is set at 37.5. You combine those two together, that's almost 8 for a fantasy score. So not really factoring in a touchdown all too much, but at that point, you'd just be better off just betting on him to score a touchdown. And so with that, I see that all as a little bit too thin. Now, it is worth calling out, though. Zay Flowers is currently questionable in this game. I do think that would help Mark Andrews out a lot if Zay Flowers were to sit, but I also think Isaiah Likely would actually get a bump as well if Zay Flowers were to sit. Now, I do expect him to play, but it is a short week. It wouldn't be the craziest thing to see Zay Flowers sit. That also creates a little bit of a muddy situation here, because if Zay Flowers does end up sitting, I do think that hurts the likelihood of this game being a potential blowout in favor of that Derrick Henry rush attempts prop. That's the issue that we have. Let's go ahead and jump into Houston because, well, there's a little bit of injury news to talk about there as well. All right, guys. So we do know that Tank Dell is going to be out in this game here for Houston. He suffered a season-ending injury last week. Unfortunate, because that was finally his best week of the season. And so with Tank Dell being out, with Diggs being out, who is going to get the snaps? And honestly, it is a big question mark, because Xavier Hutchinson was the player that directly got the most snaps there in replace of Tank Dell, getting 94% of the snaps after the Tank Dell injury. And then you saw Robert Woods actually getting 81% of the snaps there in replace of Tank Dell. But, and it's a big but, John Mechie was out in that game. And so he's going to be active in this game as well. I don't know what to expect here. Like, they like Mechie, they like Xavier Woods. And personally, I think Woods has kind of been steady for them in like a old man game type of way. And you guys see this opponent rank here. The Baltimore Ravens are poor against stopping opposing receivers. So we probably do want to be betting on Houston in some capacity with the receivers. Now, I personally didn't see a bet that I liked a lot. If you guys see one, like honestly, if you guys are a Houston Texans fan or something like that, you feel like you got a good pulse on it, let us know. Because I feel like that's a toss-up with which of those kind of 3 receivers we'd be looking at. Personally, I think the Nico Collins lines are correct. The one line that we see popping up here that is seemingly the best bet on the board for the NFL is Dalton Schultz to get over 3.5 receptions. And this is probably my favorite bet on the day, is Dalton Schultz over 3.5 receptions. So first and foremost, this is already my favorite bet here, guys. And I didn't look at the odds prior. And so I love the fact that Vegas is agreeing with this. 53.6% likelihood for this one to hit. And it is still currently a standard bet for us. That's pretty awesome. And so let's talk about the reasons as to why I like this bet. So first and foremost, he was able to get the over last week, obviously with Tank Dell getting injured in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. 5 receptions there. Against Miami, 3. Against Jacksonville, 5, 2, and then 5. So we're on a little bit of a every other game trend here, which I don't like. But with Tank Dell being out, we did see what he was able to do last year, kind of at the same time last year when Tank Dell got injured there as well. So last year at this time, there was about 4 games there in which he saw 4 receptions, 8 receptions, 2 receptions, and 5 receptions. So in 3 out of the 4 games, was able to get his over receptions. And if we tack on last week then as well, was able to get the receptions there as well. So 4 out of the past 5 games. Now, why are we looking at last year? Well, last year they obviously didn't have Diggs, whereas Tank Dell being injured earlier on this season, Stephon Diggs played in that game, so it's not exactly a 1-for-1 swap. This offense is going to probably go back to that late season version. Okay. And so that's why I'm kind of looking at that there with Dalton Schultz. And during that time span, he did see about 45 yards per game there as well. So if you want to bet on his over receiving yards, you could end up doing that. It's not exactly a bet that I feel like we need to go out of our way to target, but it's not terrible. He did have 81% of the snaps last week there as well. And then I do want to call out his targets as well last week. 8 targets in that game. And really his targets lately have been ideal. So 8, 4, that game against Miami, which they were playing with the lead. And that's another thing that I think is worth calling out. If we are betting on Baltimore, if we are betting on Derrick Henry to get over his rush attempts, I think this is a bet that correlates well with that. We're betting on that game script again. And so this would fit that mold a little bit better there. And then that's also going to be true for the next bet that I want to be on, which is going to be Joe Mixon. So actually one of my favorite bets would be Joe Mixon for his over receiving yards. Okay. Baltimore has been pretty decent against stopping opposing running backs through the run game. Decent. They've actually been a little bit poor stopping them via the passing game, or in the receiving game, I should say. This is the third easiest matchup for opposing running backs in terms of receiving yards. Now, the issue with Joe Mixon is that Joe Mixon, not exactly the third down running back. It's actually Dare Ogunbowale is the third down running back. And so that could play a part in it. They have been a little bit tight on Joe Mixon's snaps recently as well. Again, you got a player that was a little bit banged up throughout the season on a shorter schedule. That does play into a little bit. That's the annoying part about having a Christmas slate game on Wednesday, right? It's a very short week. These veteran players could be limited in their snaps. That being said, the Baltimore Ravens give up an average of 42 receiving yards per game to opposing running backs. And so I'm looking at this underdog line of 17.5 receiving yards. I feel pretty good about that. And so don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. We see his kind of receiving game work over this season. Not exactly getting a ton of targets every single game, but for the most part, he's been able to crush this over in most games there as well. And so I find this line interesting. I think they are betting on Dare Ogunbowale to continue to get that passing down work, and maybe Joe Mixon to still be a little bit limited. I'm kind of betting on that to not be true in this game. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and jump on into the bets of the day here for PrizePicks and Underdog. But first, just a quick reminder of the promo code that's currently going on up until the new year. Use the promo code Keep Cashing, get 20% off your first 9 to 5 month membership. That is for new or returning members. Again, that's for the first month only. All right, guys, so jumping into the bet of the day on PrizePicks, this is more, and for the underdog slip as well, this is more for showing you guys kind of my favorite bets. This isn't the exact slip that I'd want to be running out, which will be true for underdog as well. The issue that I'm having is that we are betting on a lot of demon and goblin prop bets, or, bets that are either too likely to hit where the payout's going to be reduced or not as likely to hit where the payout's going to be increased, which is nice. But if we're betting on a lot of bets that not in our favor, that decreases the likelihood of those bets hitting and being profitable for us in the long term. So in summary, guys, I do really like this Dalton Schultz over 3.5 receptions. I think that's a very good standard bet that we are getting. Honestly, if you just want to pair that up with Derrick Henry and his over 18.5 rush attempts on a PrizePicks slip, I think I'd be okay with that because it's game script dependent. It correlates pretty well. Also do want to call a little bit of attention to this one, the Calvin Austin fantasy score line. I kind of mentioned I liked his over receptions, which I do, but that's more if we get news that George Pickens sits. If George Pickens ends up playing, I think this is another way to go about attacking it. Again, Calvin Austin has looked good, but if we get news that Pickens plays, Calvin Austin will still get a deep shot or two. He just needs to come down with it. And so this would be another way to go about attacking that, because if Pickens sits, this is going to be a good bet. And then just kind of jumping into those underdog bets, just to recap, a lot of these bets are going to be reduced payout prop bets, which I don't exactly like. The one standard bet that I really like a little bit more than Vegas and PrizePicks and Underdog is Patrick Mahomes to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Again, last week should have had it there with Justin Watson dropping a seemingly easy passing touchdown. He also had a rushing touchdown as well. You don't expect that to be there. That could have easily just had been another passing touchdown there for him as well. With Hollywood Brown getting more healthy, with DeAndre Hopkins more acclimated to the offense, and Travis Kelce still being Travis Kelce, and Pacheco probably being a little bit limited in this game, I do think that helps the likelihood for Patrick Mahomes to be able to throw for an additional touchdown. He's been averaging one a bunch, but the matchup is a seemingly good matchup with the Steelers, who have given up 2.5 passing touchdowns on average over the past 4 weeks. Then again, Joe Mixon, guys, I do really like him to get over 17.5 receiving yards. That line has been fluctuating between 18.5 and 17.5. So just be on the lookout for making the best bet possible there. That's going to do it for this video, guys. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. But more importantly, Merry Christmas to you guys. Hopefully you guys have a good Christmas, had a good Christmas, or are having a good Christmas, and also have a good Happy New Year. Thanks, guys. That's going to do it. Thank you for watching. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.